I was ready to save my daughter with a kidney, but my grandson's secret changed everything. The operating room was cold, sterile, and waiting for me. I had signed every document, said my prayers, and prepared to give my daughter the gift of life itself, my kidney. But as I lay on that gurney, what I didn't know was that my own flesh and blood was about to harvest more than just an organ from me. They were harvesting my love, my trust, and my future. What I also didn't know was that a 12-year-old boy, my grandson, held the key to a truth so devastating it would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. Chapter 1. The Call That Changed Everything. The phone rang at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in October, jarring me from the first peaceful sleep I'd had in weeks. At 55, I'd learned that calls before 7 a.m. rarely brought good news, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to hear. "Mama!" My daughter Keisha's voice cracked through the receiver, and immediately my heart clenched. 28 years of being her mother had taught me every nuance of her voice, and this wasn't the strong, independent woman who'd graduated magna cum laude from Howard University. This was my little girl, scared and broken. "Baby, Barthi, what's wrong?" I sat up in bed, my mind already racing through possibilities. Had something happened to Marcus, my 12-year-old grandson? Was she hurt? "Mama, I need to tell you something, and I need you to sit down." I was already sitting, but her words made me feel like I was falling. "Keisha, you're scaring me. Just tell me what's happening." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear her breathing, could almost feel her gathering courage through the phone line. When she finally spoke, her words hit me like a physical blow. "I'm dying, Mama. My kidneys are failing, and I'm dying." The world tilted. The coffee mug I'd been holding slipped from my fingers and shattered on the hardwood floor, but I barely heard it. "What do you mean you're dying? What are you talking about?" "I've been sick for months, but I didn't want to worry you. I thought it would get better on its own, but it's gotten worse. So much worse." Her voice dissolved into sobs that reached through the phone and wrapped around my heart like barbed wire. I was already moving, my feet finding slippers, my hands reaching for clothes. "I'm coming over right now. Where are you? Are you at the hospital?" "I'm at Emory. Mama, they're saying I need a kidney transplant and soon." "The doctors. They're saying I might only have months if we don't find a donor." Only have months. The words echoed in my mind as I drove through Atlanta's morning traffic, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had gone white. How had I not known? How had my only child, my baby girl, been fighting for her life while I'd been worried about mundane things like paying the mortgage and whether my garden was getting enough water? Chapter 2. The Diagnosis That Broke My Heart. Emory University Hospital's nephrology wing smelled like industrial-strength disinfectant and broken dreams. I found Keisha in room 314, looking smaller than I'd seen her since she was Marcus's age. Her normally radiant dark skin had taken on an ashen undertone, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and pain she'd been hiding from me. "Oh, baby!" I rushed to her bedside, gathering her into my arms the way I had when she was little and had scraped her knee or had a nightmare. But this nightmare was real, and I couldn't kiss it better. Dr. Patricia Hernandez, Keisha's nephrologist, entered the room with a thick file and the expression that had probably delivered bad news more times than anyone should have to. She was a small woman with kind eyes, but there was something in her demeanor that made me straighten in my chair. "Mrs. Washington, I'm glad you're here. We need to discuss Keisha's condition and her options." The next 30 minutes felt like a masterclass in how quickly a life could unravel. Chronic kidney disease, stage 4 progressing rapidly to stage 5, years of damage that had somehow flown under the radar, dialysis as a temporary measure, the urgent need for a transplant. "How long does she have?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Dr. Hernandez glanced at Keisha, then back at me. "With dialysis, we can buy time. but her kidney function is declining rapidly. Without a transplant, we're looking at months, not years. Months. My vibrant, brilliant daughter, who had been my pride and joy since the day she drew her first breath. The woman who had given me my precious grandson, who had built a career in marketing, who had dreams and plans, and so much life left to live. What about a living donor? I heard myself asking. I'm her mother. Surely I'd be a match? Dr. Hernandez nodded slowly. Living donation is definitely an option, and family members often make excellent matches. We'd need to run comprehensive tests. But given your genetic relationship, there's a very good chance you could be compatible. I looked at Keisha, who had been unusually quiet during this exchange. Tears were streaming down her face, but she wasn't looking at me. She was staring at her hands folded in her lap. Mama, you don't have to. Don't you dare. I cut her off, my voice stronger than I felt. Don't you dare tell me I don't have to save my child's life. Of course I'm going to be tested. Of course I'm going to give you my kidney if I can. That afternoon, I submitted to what felt like every medical test known to humanity. Blood work, urine samples, chest x-rays, psychological evaluations, meetings with social workers who wanted to ensure I wasn't being coerced. The irony of that last part would haunt me for months to come. Chapter 3. The Perfect Match. Mrs. Washington, I have wonderful news. Dr. Hernandez called me herself 3 days later, her voice carrying a warmth that had been absent during our first meeting. You're a perfect match for Keisha, not just compatible, perfect. This kind of match between a parent and child is relatively rare. Perfect. The word should have filled me with joy, but instead it felt heavy with responsibility. I was going to save my daughter's life, but I was also about to undergo major surgery at an age when recovery would be more challenging than it would have been 20 years ago. When can we schedule the surgery? I asked. We'll need a few more weeks to complete some additional testing and ensure both you and Keisha are in optimal condition for surgery, but we're looking at mid-November, assuming everything continues to look good. I called Keisha immediately after hanging up with Dr. Hernandez, expecting to hear joy, relief, maybe tears of happiness. Instead, her response was oddly muted. That's great, Mama. Really great. You don't sound great. Baby. This is good news. This means you're going to live. You're going to see Marcus graduate from high school, maybe even college. You're going to dance at his wedding someday. I know, Mama, it's a lot to process, and I feel so guilty that you have to go through surgery because of me. Keisha Marie Washington, you listen to me. I carried you for 9 months and have loved you for 28 years. If giving you my kidney means I get to love you for 28 more, then this isn't a sacrifice. It's a privilege. But even as I said the words, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off in her voice. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Chapter 4. Preparing for the Gift of Life. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. I rearranged my work schedule at the nonprofit where I'd been the office manager for the past 15 years. I meal prepped enough food for an army, knowing that my recovery would limit my ability to care for Marcus when he stayed with me on weekends. I read everything I could find about kidney donation, recovery times, potential complications. Keisha seemed to be getting worse by the day. She'd started dialysis 3 times a week, and the treatment left her exhausted and nauseated. On the days she felt well enough, she'd bring Marcus over, and we'd spend hours playing board games or watching movies. My grandson was handling the situation better than I'd expected, though I sometimes caught him staring at his mother with a worry that seemed too mature for his 12 years. Grandma Diane, he asked me one afternoon while Keisha was resting on my couch, is Mama really going to be okay after the surgery? I pulled him close, inhaling the scent of his hair that still smelled like the baby shampoo his mother refused to let him give up. Yes, baby. The doctors are very good, and once Mama has my kidney, she's going to feel so much better. But what about you? Won't you be sick without both kidneys? People only need one kidney to live a healthy life, I explained, marveling not for the first time at how perceptive he was. I'll be just fine. A little sore for a while, but fine. He nodded, but I could see he was still processing. Marcus had always been an observant child, quietly taking in everything around him. It was a quality that reminded me of myself at that age, always watching, always listening, always trying to understand the adult world that seemed so complicated and full of secrets. 2 weeks before the surgery, Keisha started acting strange. She'd always been close with me, calling every day, stopping by multiple times a week, but suddenly she seemed distant, almost avoiding me. When I asked her about it, she insisted she was just focusing on getting stronger for the surgery. I'm trying to eat better, get more rest when I'm not at dialysis, she explained when I pressed her about her increased absence. Dr. Hernandez says the better shape I'm in going into surgery, the better my recovery will be. It made sense, but it didn't feel right. Keisha had never been one to withdraw when she was scared or stressed. If anything, she usually clung closer to me during difficult times. Chapter 5. The Night Before. November 14th arrived with an unseasonably warm breeze and the kind of golden light that made Atlanta look magical. I'd spent the day in quiet preparation, laundry folded, bills paid, a detailed list of instructions for my neighbor who'd agreed to check on my house while I was in the hospital. Keisha and Marcus came over for dinner, and I'd made all of their favorites: fried chicken, mac and cheese, collard greens, and cornbread. It felt like a celebration and a Last Supper all at once. "Grandma, you've outdone yourself," Marcus said, loading his plate with seconds. At 12, he was all arms and legs, growing so fast I could practically see him getting taller. "I wanted tonight to be special," I said, watching as Keisha picked at her food. The dialysis had been affecting her appetite, but tonight seemed worse than usual. After dinner, Marcus helped me with the dishes while Keisha rested in the living room. As we worked side by side at the sink, he seemed unusually quiet. "Grandma Diane?" His voice was small, uncertain. "What is it, baby?" He glanced toward the living room, then back at me, lowering his voice. "Can I ask you something? And will you promise not to get mad?" The serious tone in his voice made me stop washing dishes and turn to face him fully. "Of course, you can ask me anything." He was quiet for a long moment, his young face scrunched up in concentration. "How do you know Mama is really sick?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I mean, how do you know she's not just pretending?" My heart stopped. "Marcus, why would you ask something like that? Why would your mother pretend to be sick?" His eyes filled with tears, and suddenly he looked every bit the scared 12-year-old he was. "Because I heard her on the phone. Grandma, I heard her talking to someone about money, about needing money really bad, and I heard her say something about selling something." The dish I was holding slipped from my hands and shattered in the sink, but I barely noticed. "Marcus, what exactly did you hear?" "I don't know. I don't understand it all, but Grandma, what if she's not really sick? What if she's just trying to get money somehow?" I knelt down to his level, taking his small hands in mine. They were trembling. "Baby, your mama is very sick. I've seen the medical reports, I've talked to the doctors. This isn't something anyone could fake." But even as I said the words, a cold dread was beginning to form in my stomach. Marcus was a smart kid, and he knew his mother better than anyone except me. If he was concerned enough to voice these suspicions. "Marcus, I need you to tell me exactly what you heard your mama say." Chapter 6. A Child's Devastating Truth. Marcus looked around nervously as if afraid his mother might overhear from the next room. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "It was last week when I was staying at Mama's apartment. I got up to get water in the middle of the night, and she was in the kitchen on her phone. She didn't know I was there." He paused, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. I handed him a tissue and waited. "She was crying, Grandma, but not like sad crying, like scared crying." And she kept saying she needed more time, that she was going to have the money soon. She said something about the kidney thing being almost ready. My blood turned to ice water. The kidney thing? And then she said she knew someone who could buy it for enough to cover what she owed plus extra. His voice broke. Grandma, I think Mama wants to sell your kidney. The world tilted sideways. I gripped the edge of the counter to keep myself upright as Marcus's words echoed in my mind. Sell your kidney. The kidney thing. Someone who could buy it. Marcus, are you absolutely sure that's what you heard? He nodded miserably. I've been thinking about it every day since then. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't want to get Mama in trouble. But Grandma, I'm scared. What if she's not really sick? What if she's just trying to trick you? I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight while my mind raced. Everything I thought I knew about the past few months was suddenly suspect. Keisha's distance lately. Her odd reactions to good news about the surgery, the way she'd been avoiding direct conversation about her symptoms. But the medical reports were real. Dr. Hernandez was a respected physician. The test results showed clear evidence of kidney disease, didn't they? Marcus, I need you to stay right here with your mama while I make a phone call, okay? Don't tell her what we talked about. Can you do that for me? He nodded, his young face etched with worry that no child should have to carry. I stepped out onto my back porch and dialed Dr. Hernandez's emergency line with shaking fingers. It was nearly 9 p.m., but this couldn't wait until morning. Dr. Hernandez, this is Diane Washington, Keisha's mother. I'm sorry to call so late, but I need to ask you something about my daughter's medical records. Of course, Mrs. Washington. Is everything all right? You're not having second thoughts about tomorrow's surgery, are you? Doctor, I need you to walk me through Keisha's test results again, all of them. And I need to know, is there any possibility, any chance at all that her condition could be fabricated? The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Mrs. Washington, that's a very serious question. What's prompted this concern? Please, just answer me. Could the test results be faked? Another pause. Mrs. Washington, I think you should come to the hospital tonight. There are some things we need to discuss before tomorrow's procedure. Chapter 7. The Unthinkable Truth. The drive to Emory Hospital felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. I'd left Marcus with my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, telling him I'd be back soon and not to worry. But the look on his face as I walked out the door told me he knew this conversation with the doctor was going to change everything. I'd asked Keisha to meet me at the hospital, telling her there were some last-minute pre-surgical details to discuss. She'd seemed reluctant, but eventually agreed. Dr. Hernandez met us in a small conference room rather than Keisha's usual examination room. The change in setting immediately put me on edge. This wasn't going to be a routine conversation. Keisha, Mrs. Washington, thank you both for coming in tonight. Dr. Hernandez settled into her chair, a thick file in front of her. Mrs. Washington, you raised some concerns on the phone about the validity of Keisha's test results. Keisha's head snapped up. What, Mama? What are you talking about? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The woman sitting across from me had been my whole world for 28 years. I'd changed her diapers, held her through nightmares, celebrated every achievement, comforted every disappointment. How had I missed the signs that she was capable of something like this? Dr. Hernandez, I said, never taking my eyes off Keisha, I need you to explain to me how extensive kidney disease can develop without any symptoms that a mother would notice. The doctor glanced between us, clearly uncomfortable. Mrs. Washington, kidney disease can be quite insidious in its early stages. I'm not talking about early stages. I'm talking about stage 4 kidney disease that requires immediate transplant, the kind that would make someone so sick they could barely function. Keisha had gone very still. The color was draining from her face, but not in the sickly way I'd grown accustomed to. This was the color of someone who'd been caught. Mama, why are you asking these questions? You're scaring me. Dr. Hernandez, I continued, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. If someone wanted to fake this kind of medical condition, how might they do it? The silence in the room was suffocating. Dr. Hernandez looked down at her hands, then up at Keisha, then back at me. Mrs. Washington, there have been some irregularities in Keisha's case that have concerned me. What kind of irregularities? Some of her test results, they don't quite align with her presented symptoms, and there have been some discrepancies in her medical history that we've been trying to resolve. I felt like I was watching my life implode in slow motion. What are you saying, Dr. Hernandez? Keisha suddenly stood up, knocking her chair backward. I can't do this anymore. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it filled the room like a scream. Keisha! I stood too, reaching for her, but she backed away from me. Mama, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And then she was crying. Not the sick, weak crying of a dying woman, but the desperate, guilty sobs of someone whose lies had finally caught up with her. Dr. Hernandez closed the file in front of her. Mrs. Washington, I think your daughter has something she needs to tell you. Chapter 8, The Confession That Shattered My World. I'm not dying, Mama. 4 words. 4 simple words that demolished everything I thought I knew about my life. My daughter and my own judgment. What? The word came out as barely a breath. Keisha was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. I'm not dying. My kidneys are fine. The test results. I've been working with someone to fake them. The room started spinning. I gripped the back of my chair to keep from falling. Working with someone? What do you mean, working with someone? Dr. Martinez in the lab. He's been altering my test results to show kidney disease, and I've been taking things to make me look sick. Dr. Hernandez stood up, her professional demeanor cracking. Dr. Martinez? Carlos Martinez from our nephrology lab? Keisha nodded miserably. He needed money too. I've been paying him to change the results in the computer system. Paying him with what money? I demanded, though I was beginning to understand the horrible truth. I owe people, Mama, bad people. I've been gambling and I got in deep with some very dangerous people who don't take "I need more time" as an answer. The world was tilting again, and I had to sit down before I fell down. How much do you owe? $200,000. I stared at her, sure I'd misheard. $200,000? Keisha, how is that even possible? It started small. Just a few hundred at the poker tables, then online betting. But I kept losing, and I kept betting more to try to win it back. Then I found the high-stakes games, and I thought I could make it all back in one night. She trailed off, her face buried in her hands. So you decided to steal my kidney to pay your gambling debts. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and cold. No, Mama, it wasn't supposed to be like that. I was going to take the kidney and sell it, yes. But you were never supposed to know. You were just supposed to think you were saving my life. And then what? I wake up from surgery missing an organ while you walk away with $200,000? The buyer. He pays $300,000 for a perfect match. I would have paid off my debts and still had money left over to disappear for a while until things cooled down. Dr. Hernandez was already reaching for her phone. I'm calling security and the police. This is fraud, conspiracy, and attempted... I don't even know what to call this. But I held up my hand to stop her. I needed to understand the full scope of what my daughter had been planning. Keisha, what about Marcus? What about your son while you were planning to disappear for a while? I was going to send him to stay with you permanently. I had it all worked out. You'd recover from the surgery thinking you'd saved my life. Marcus would be safe with you, and I'd be able to start over somewhere new. Start over? I stood up, fury finally overtaking shock. You were going to fake your death? You were going to let your son think his mother died while I recovered from unnecessary surgery. It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone. You have 2 kidneys. You'd be fine with one. Marcus would be better off with you anyway, and I'd finally be free of this debt that's been killing me. free of the debt that you created by gambling away money you didn't have. Mama, you don't understand the pressure I've been under. These people, they've been threatening Marcus. They know where he goes to school, where you live. They said if I didn't pay up, they'd take it out on my family. And there it was. The manipulation I should have seen coming. Even now, caught in her lies, she was trying to make me feel sorry for her, trying to make this somehow my fault or Marcus's fault or anyone's fault, but her own. So instead of coming to me for help, instead of being honest about your problem, you decided to mutilate me to solve it? I didn't know what else to do. Dr. Hernandez had been listening to this exchange with growing horror. Mrs. Washington, we need to contact the authorities immediately. This isn't just fraud. This is conspiracy to commit assault, possibly attempted manslaughter depending on how the surgery went. I looked at my daughter, this stranger who looked like my daughter, and felt something die inside me. Not just trust, not just love, but something deeper, the fundamental belief that I knew who she was. 28 years, I said quietly. I loved you for 28 years. I changed your diapers, walked the floor with you when you were teething, held your hand on your first day of school. I cheered at your graduation, cried when Marcus was born, supported you through your divorce, and you were going to butcher me like a piece of meat to pay for your gambling addiction. Mama, please. No. My voice was steel now. You don't get to call me Mama anymore. You lost that right the moment you decided my body was collateral for your mistakes. Chapter 9. The Aftermath of Betrayal. The next few hours were a blur of police officers, lawyers, hospital administrators, and paperwork. Dr. Martinez was arrested at his home at 6 a.m., and by noon the story was all over the local news. Hospital employee and patient conspire in kidney fraud scheme. I sat in a hospital waiting room, no longer a patient but a victim, watching my daughter being led away in handcuffs on the television, mounted in the corner. The news anchor was calling it one of the most shocking cases of medical fraud in Georgia's history. Marcus was with Mrs. Patterson, and I'd asked her not to turn on the news. He didn't need to see his mother like that, though I knew he'd have to learn the truth eventually. Mrs. Washington? A social worker named Jennifer Kim approached me with a gentle smile and a stack of forms. I know this has been an overwhelming day, but we need to discuss Marcus's immediate care situation. I looked up at her, feeling older than my 55 years. What do you mean? With Keisha in custody, Marcus needs a guardian. I understand you're his grandmother? Yes. He stays with me on weekends anyway, and he's comfortable in my home. That's good. We can arrange temporary custody while the legal situation is sorted out. Given the circumstances, it's likely you'll be able to pursue permanent custody if that's what you want. What I wanted. I'd never thought about raising another child at my age, but Marcus wasn't just another child. He was my grandson, and more importantly, he was the only member of my immediate family who hadn't betrayed me. Yes, I want custody. He's been through enough trauma. The last thing he needs is to be placed with strangers. Mrs. Kim nodded and began going over the paperwork, but I was only half listening. My mind was spinning with the logistics of suddenly becoming a single parent again. My small house would need some adjustments to accommodate a growing boy permanently. I'd need to enroll him in the local middle school, find after-school care for the days when I worked late. But underneath the practical concerns was a deeper worry. How was I going to help Marcus process what his mother had done? How does a 12-year-old come to terms with the fact that his mother was willing to harm his beloved grandmother to finance her gambling addiction? Mrs. Washington, there's one more thing. Mrs. Kim's voice brought me back to the present. The district attorney's office wants to speak with you about your testimony. Keisha's case is going to trial, and your testimony will be crucial. The thought of testifying against my own daughter made me feel sick, but I knew I didn't have a choice. If I didn't speak up, she might find another victim, another family to destroy with her lies. What about Marcus? Will he have to testify too? We'll do everything we can to protect him from having to testify in open court. His initial statement to the police should be sufficient, especially since his information led to uncovering the fraud in the first place. Marcus, my brave, perceptive grandson who had trusted his instincts enough to speak up when something felt wrong. If he hadn't said anything, I'd be waking up from surgery right now, missing a kidney, thinking I'd saved my daughter's life while she counted her blood money. Chapter 10. Picking up the pieces. 3 days later, I was back in my own house with Marcus, trying to figure out how to rebuild our lives from the rubble of Keisha's betrayal. The media attention had been intense but brief. Apparently, medical fraud wasn't interesting enough to hold the public's attention for more than a news cycle. Marcus had been remarkably resilient, though I caught him staring out the window sometimes with a look of loss that broke my heart. He'd lost his mother, not to death, but to something arguably worse, the knowledge that she'd been willing to hurt people he loved for money. Grandma Diane? He found me in the kitchen one morning making his breakfast before school. "What is it, sweetheart? Do you hate Mama?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on anger and betrayal that I hadn't stopped to examine what I actually felt about Keisha. "No, baby, I don't hate your mama. But you're angry." Yes, I'm very angry and hurt and disappointed. I sat down at the kitchen table and patted the chair next to me. "But Marcus, anger and hate aren't the same thing. I'm angry at the choices your mama made, but I don't hate her. She's still the little girl I raised, even though she's made some very bad decisions." "Will she go to prison?" "Probably. Yes." He nodded, processing this information with the serious demeanor that had become more pronounced since that night at the hospital. "Will she ever be able to come home?" My throat tightened. "I don't know, Marcus. That's going to depend on a lot of things. What the judge decides, whether your mama gets help for her gambling problem, whether she can prove that she's changed." "Do you think she can change?" It was the hardest question he could have asked, because I honestly didn't know the answer. The woman who had been willing to steal my kidney to pay gambling debts felt like a stranger to me, but she was also the daughter who had called me every day for 28 years, the mother who had sung lullabies to Marcus when he was a baby, the girl who had brought me handmade Mother's Day cards every year until she was 18. "I hope she can change, baby. I really hope she can." The truth was, I felt like I was grieving someone who wasn't dead, the Keisha I thought I knew, the loving daughter, the devoted mother, the woman with a bright future. That person felt gone to me, replaced by someone capable of unthinkable cruelty. Whether the woman in jail could find her way back to being someone I could trust again remained to be seen. Chapter 11. The Trial. Keisha's trial began 6 months later, on a rainy Tuesday in April. I'd spent those months settling into a routine with Marcus, enrolling him in counseling, and trying to build a new normal for both of us. The house felt different with him there permanently, fuller, louder, more alive, but also shadowed by the circumstances that had brought us together. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, and more crowded. Keisha sat at the defendant's table in a blue suit I didn't recognize, her hair pulled back in a style that made her look younger than her 28 years. She'd lost weight during her time in jail, and the hollows under her eyes were real now, born of stress rather than performance. When our eyes met across the courtroom, I saw a flash of the little girl she'd once been, and for a moment, my heart broke all over again. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Sandra Chen, laid out the case with clinical precision. The falsified medical records, the conspiracy with Dr. Martinez, the elaborate deception designed to coerce an unnecessary organ donation. When she described the potential consequences, the risks of surgery for a 55-year-old woman, the permanent physical and psychological damage, I had to close my eyes. Dr. Martinez had already pled guilty and been sentenced to 5 years in prison. His cooperation with the prosecution meant the evidence against Keisha was overwhelming. The only question was whether the jury would see her as a master manipulator deserving harsh punishment or a desperate mother caught in circumstances beyond her control. Keisha's lawyer, a public defender who looked barely older than Marcus, tried to paint a picture of a woman driven to desperation by threatening creditors and crippling gambling addiction. They brought in experts on gambling addiction, testimony about the dangerous people Keisha owed money to, character witnesses who spoke to her previous good nature. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the witness stand on unsteady legs, feeling like I was about to betray my child all over again. But as I looked out at the courtroom, at Marcus sitting in the front row with Mrs. Patterson, at the judge waiting patiently for my testimony, at Keisha herself staring down at her hands, I remembered that telling the truth wasn't betrayal. Lying to steal someone's organs was betrayal. Mrs. Washington, can you tell the court about your relationship with the defendant? Prosecutor Chen asked. Keisha is my daughter, my only child. My voice was steady, though my hands were shaking. I raised her by myself after her father left when she was 3. We've always been very close. When she told you about her kidney disease, what was your reaction? I was devastated, but I never hesitated to offer my kidney. She's my daughter. I would do anything to save her life. Did you have any doubts about her diagnosis? None. Why would I? She had medical reports, a respected doctor, obvious symptoms. It never occurred to me that someone would fake something like that. What made you finally question the diagnosis? I glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. My grandson overheard a phone conversation that concerned him. He was brave enough to tell me what he'd heard, even though he was afraid of getting his mother in trouble. And when you confronted Dr. Hernandez with your concerns, she told me there had been irregularities in Keisha's case, that some of the test results didn't align with her symptoms. The questioning continued for another hour, with Prosecutor Chen walking me through the timeline of events, the emotional impact of the deception, and the physical risks I would have faced had the surgery proceeded. When Keisha's lawyer cross-examined me, she tried to emphasize my daughter's previous good character and the desperation that had driven her to such extreme measures. Mrs. Washington, would you say that prior to this incident, Keisha was a good mother to Marcus? Yes, she was a devoted mother. And she'd never asked you for money before, even when she was struggling financially? I had to think about that. No, she was always very independent, almost too independent sometimes. So this wasn't part of a pattern of taking advantage of you? No, it wasn't. But even as I said it, I wondered if there had been signs I'd missed, smaller deceptions that had prepared the way for this ultimate betrayal. When I stepped down from the witness stand, Keisha was crying silently. Our eyes met again. And this time she mouthed, "I'm sorry." I nodded because I believed she was sorry. The question was whether sorry was enough. Chapter 12. The Verdict and Its Aftermath. The jury deliberated for 2 days before returning with their verdict. Guilty on all counts. Conspiracy to commit fraud, conspiracy to commit assault, and criminal endangerment. The judge sentenced Keisha to 8 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 5 years if she completed addiction. Treatment programs and demonstrated genuine rehabilitation. As they led her away, she looked back at Marcus and me one more time. "Take care of my boy," she called out, her voice breaking. "Tell him I love him." I nodded because whatever else she had done, I knew that part was true. She did love Marcus in her own complicated, damaged way. The months that followed were about building a new life from the ashes of the old one. Marcus started seeing a different counselor, one who specialized in children dealing with parental incarceration. His grades improved, and he joined the school's robotics club, discovering a talent for engineering that reminded me of his grandfather, Keisha's father, who had been brilliant with his hands before addiction took him from us too. I realized I'd spent so many years focused on Keisha's successes that I'd failed to see the patterns. Her father had been a gambler too, though back then they called it having a good time, rather than addiction. The apple, as they say, doesn't fall far from the tree. But Marcus was different. Marcus had been willing to speak up when something felt wrong, even when it meant potentially hurting someone he loved. That gave me hope. Chapter 13. Unexpected Visitors. 18 months after the trial, on a Saturday morning when Marcus and I were working in the garden, a black sedan pulled up in front of my house. Two men in expensive suits got out and walked up the front path with the kind of purposeful stride that made my blood run cold. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" I called from the porch, where I'd instinctively positioned myself between them and Marcus. "Mrs. Washington? We're looking for Keisha Washington. We understand she's your daughter." My heart started racing. My daughter is incarcerated. Has been for over a year. The taller of the two men smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We're aware of her situation. We represent some business associates of hers who have been very patient about a debt she owes." "Grandma?" Marcus had come up behind me, and I could hear the fear in his voice. These were the kind of men Keisha had described, the dangerous people who had been threatening our family. "Marcus, go inside and call Mrs. Patterson. Tell her we need her to come over right away." "Mrs. Washington," the shorter man said, "we're not here to cause trouble. We just want to discuss how Miss Keisha's debt might be resolved. Her debt has nothing to do with me or my grandson." "Well, that's where we disagree. See, when someone owes us money and can't pay, we look to family members to help resolve the situation." I felt a familiar rage building, the same anger I'd felt when I realized what Keisha had tried to do to me. My daughter's gambling debts are not my responsibility. $250,000, the tall man said casually. "That's what she owes now, with interest and penalties. We've been very understanding about the delay, but our patience isn't infinite. 250,000, 50,000 more than when this nightmare began. I don't have that kind of money, and even if I did, I wouldn't give it to you. Mrs. Washington, we understand you own this house free and clear. Nice little place, probably worth $300,000 in today's market. That would more than cover the debt. You want me to sell my home to pay for my daughter's gambling? We want the debt resolved. How you make that happen is up to you." I thought about Keisha sitting in her prison cell, probably having no idea that her debts were still growing, still threatening the family she'd claimed to be protecting. "Gentlemen, I'm going to say this once, and then I'm going to ask you to leave my property. My daughter made her choices, and she's paying the consequences. I will not sacrifice my home, my security, or my grandson's future to clean up her mess. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with her when she gets out of prison in 4 years." The two men exchanged looks, and for a moment I thought they might try to push the issue, but then the tall one shrugged. "We'll be in touch, Mrs. Washington. These situations have a way of working themselves out." After they left, I called the detective who had worked on Keisha's case and reported the visit. He promised to look into it, but warned me that loan sharks were notoriously difficult to prosecute. "Mrs. Washington, have you considered relocating? Maybe moving to a different state until this blows over?" The suggestion hit me like a slap. Uproot my entire life, take Marcus away from his school and friends, abandon the home I'd worked 30 years to pay off, all because of Keisha's choices. "Detective, I've already given up enough because of my daughter's decisions. I'm not giving up my home, too." Chapter 14. The Price of Standing Ground. The threats escalated over the next few weeks. Hang-up calls at all hours, a brick through my front window, my car tires slashed in the grocery store parking lot. Each incident was reported to the police, but there was little they could do without more evidence. Marcus was having nightmares again, and I was seriously considering the detective's suggestion about relocating when salvation came from an unexpected source. Grandma Diane? Marcus found me in the kitchen one evening, looking more serious than any 13-year-old should have to look. "I've been thinking about Mama's debt." Marcus, that's not something you need to worry about. But it is, isn't it? Those men aren't going to go away just because we ignore them. He was right, and we both knew it. The men who had visited weren't the type to simply write off a $250,000 debt. What are you thinking, sweetheart? What if we could prove that Mama never actually borrowed the money legitimately? What if we could show that they were taking advantage of her gambling addiction to trap her in debt? I stared at my grandson, amazed once again by his insight. Marcus, that's actually brilliant. But how would we prove something like that? I've been doing research online. There are laws about predatory lending, especially when it involves gambling addiction. And I found something else. He handed me a printout of a news article dated 6 months earlier. The headline read, "Federal Task Force Targets Illegal Gambling Operations in Georgia." Look at the names, Grandma. I scanned the article until I found what he was pointing to. Vincent Carrera and Michael Torres, described as key figures in an illegal gambling ring that targeted vulnerable individuals with addiction problems. Vincent and Michael. The same names I'd heard Keisha mention on the phone that night. Marcus had overheard her conversation. Marcus, this is incredible. How did you find this? I remembered the names Mama said that night, and I've been searching for them online. Grandma, what if Mama wasn't just gambling with regular bookies? What if she got involved with these federal criminals? The possibility was both terrifying and hopeful. If Keisha had been victimized by criminals who were already under federal investigation, it might change everything about our situation. I called Detective Morrison immediately and explained what Marcus had discovered. Within hours, we were meeting with federal agents who confirmed that Keisha had indeed been one of the victims of the Carrera-Torres gambling ring. Mrs. Washington, your daughter's debt isn't legally enforceable, Agent Sarah Rodriguez explained. These men were running an illegal operation designed to trap people in impossible debt cycles. Your daughter was as much a victim as she was a perpetrator. What does that mean for the threats we've been receiving? It means we now have probable cause to arrest the men who've been harassing you, and it means your daughter's debt is void. Chapter 15. A Long Road to Forgiveness. 6 months later, Vincent Carrera and Michael Torres were sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for racketeering, illegal gambling operations, and extortion. The charges related to their threats against Marcus and me added another 5 years each to their sentences. With the immediate threat resolved, I found myself facing a different challenge: what to do about Keisha. She'd been writing letters, dozens of them, from prison, letters full of apologies, explanations, promises to change, letters that Marcus read eagerly and that I could barely bring myself to open. She's been going to gambling addiction meetings, Marcus told me one afternoon, waving her latest letter, and she's been working in the prison library helping other inmates get their GEDs. That's good, Marcus. I'm glad she's trying to better herself. Don't you want to read her letters? I looked at my grandson, this boy who had saved me from physical harm, who had helped free us from criminal threats, who somehow still believed in his mother's capacity for redemption. How could I explain that I wasn't sure I was ready to forgive? That some betrayals cut so deep they changed the fundamental structure of love itself? Marcus, what your mama did to me. It's going to take time for me to work through that. But you said anger and hate aren't the same thing. They're not. I don't hate your mama, but forgiveness isn't something you can rush. Baby, it has to happen naturally in its own time. He nodded, though I could see he didn't fully understand. At 13, he still believed that love could fix anything, that family bonds were stronger than any betrayal. I envied him that innocence. Chapter 16. The Visit. 2 years into Keisha's sentence, she became eligible for family visits. Marcus had been begging me to take him to see her, and I'd been running out of excuses to avoid it. Grandma, please, I miss her, and she's been clean for 2 years now. The counselors say she's made real progress. I looked at this boy who had become the center of my world, who had grown 3 inches in the past year, and whose voice was starting to crack when he got excited. He needed his mother, or at least he needed to maintain some connection to her. Whatever my feelings about Keisha, I couldn't let my hurt damage Marcus's relationship with his mother. "Okay," I said finally, "we'll go see her." The Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison was a sprawling complex of concrete and razor wire that looked exactly like what it was, a place designed to separate dangerous people from society. As we went through the security checkpoints, I watched Marcus's excitement fade into nervousness. "It's scarier than I thought it would be," he whispered as we were led to the visitation room. "Prison is supposed to be scary, sweetheart. It's supposed to make people think twice about the choices that got them there." And then she was there, walking across the room in her orange jumpsuit, looking smaller and older than I remembered. Prison had changed her, not just physically, but in some deeper way. The cocky confidence that had always been part of her personality was gone, replaced by something more humble, more uncertain. "Marcus!" She swept him into a hug that lasted several minutes, and I could see both of them crying. "Oh my God, look how tall you've gotten, and you're so handsome." "Hi, Mama." His voice was muffled against her shoulder. Then she looked at me over his head, and I saw all of it. The guilt, the shame, the desperate hope for forgiveness. "Mama," she said quietly. "Keisha." We sat at a small table in a room full of other families having similar conversations. Marcus chattered away, telling her about school, his friends, the robotics competition his team had won. She listened with an intensity that suggested she was trying to memorize every word. "How are you doing, Keisha?" I asked when there was a lull in Marcus's stories. "I'm okay." "Better than okay, actually. I've been clean for 2 years, 4 months, and 16 days. I go to meetings every week, and I'm working with a counselor who specializes in gambling addiction." "That's good." "Mama, I know you probably don't believe me, but I am genuinely sorry for what I did to you. I've had a lot of time to think about it, and I understand now how close I came to destroying you. Physically, emotionally, financially. There's no excuse for that." I studied her face, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd learned to recognize, but what I saw was genuine remorse. The kind that comes from truly understanding the magnitude of one's actions. "I believe you're sorry, Keisha. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me?" It was the question I'd been dreading, the one I still didn't have an answer to. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I'm working on it." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "That's more than I deserve. Thank you for bringing Marcus. Thank you for taking care of him. He's my grandson. I love him. I know. And I know he's better off with you than he ever was with me." The admission was heartbreaking in its honesty. This was a woman who had finally accepted responsibility, not just for what she'd done to me, but for what she'd put her son through. "Keisha, Marcus needs his mother. Maybe not the mother you were before, but the mother you're becoming. Don't give up on that." Chapter 17. Gradual Healing. The visits became monthly events. Slowly, carefully, I began to rebuild some kind of relationship with my daughter. It wasn't the same relationship we'd had before. That easy trust and unquestioned love was gone forever. But it was something new, built on honesty and realistic expectations rather than blind faith. Marcus thrived during this period. Knowing that his mother was genuinely working to better herself, that she was taking responsibility for her actions, seemed to ease something that had been weighing on him since that first night he'd voiced his suspicions. In her 3rd year of incarceration, Keisha earned her bachelor's degree in social work through a prison education program. She wrote me a letter about it. "Mama, I know it might seem crazy that someone who manipulated and lied like I did would want to help people, but I think maybe that's exactly why I need to do this work. I understand what it's like to be so desperate that you'll hurt the people you love most. I want to help other people find better solutions before they get to that point. I had to admit, the idea of Keisha using her experience to help others made sense. She understood addiction, desperation, and the terrible choices people make when they feel trapped. If she could genuinely help people avoid those choices, maybe some good could come from all this pain. Chapter 18, The Release. Keisha was released after serving 4 years and 2 months of her 8-year sentence. The parole board cited her exemplary behavior, her educational achievements, and her completion of multiple treatment programs as factors in their decision. I picked her up on a Tuesday morning in April, exactly 3 years to the day after her trial had begun. Marcus was in school, and we'd agreed that her first day of freedom should be about adjustment rather than big reunions. She looked different in civilian clothes, older, more serious, but also healthier than she'd looked in years. Prison had forced her to confront her demons in a way that freedom never had. "Thank you for coming to get me," she said as we drove through Atlanta traffic. "Where else was I going to go? I thought maybe you'd make me take the bus. Keisha, I'm not cruel. I'm hurt and I'm cautious, but I'm not cruel." She was quiet for a while, watching the city pass by through the passenger window. "Everything looks different," she said finally. 4 years is a long time." "Yeah, it is." I'd spent months preparing for this day, working with a counselor to understand my own feelings and expectations. The woman sitting next to me was my daughter, but she was also a stranger. The person who had tried to steal my kidney was gone. Whether replaced by someone better or just someone different remained to be seen. "I found you an apartment," I said. "It's not much, but it's clean and safe. And the rent is reasonable." "You didn't have to do that." "I did it for Marcus. He needs to know you have a stable place to live." "Can I see him today?" "He'll be home from school at 3:30. We thought maybe dinner would be good. Neutral ground, not too much pressure." She nodded, understanding the careful boundaries I was setting. Chapter 19, A New Kind of Family. Rebuilding trust is like physical therapy after a major injury. It requires consistent effort, patience with setbacks, and acceptance that you may never get back to exactly where you were before. But sometimes, if you're lucky, you end up somewhere different that turns out to be just as valuable. Keisha found work at a nonprofit that provided counseling services to people struggling with addiction. Her prison education and personal experience made her uniquely qualified to help people who were where she had been 4 years earlier. She lived in her small apartment and visited Marcus and me twice a week, Wednesdays for dinner and Saturdays for whatever activity Marcus had planned. The structure worked for all of us. It gave Marcus regular time with his mother while maintaining the stability he'd found living with me. "Grandma," he said one Saturday evening after Keisha had gone home, "do you trust Mama now?" It was a question I'd been asking myself for months. "I trust that she's genuinely changed," I said carefully. "I trust that she's learned from her mistakes and is committed to doing better. But Marcus, trust isn't just about believing someone won't make the same mistake twice. It's about believing that when they make new mistakes, and we all make mistakes, they'll handle them honestly." "Do you think she would?" "I think the woman your mama is now would handle problems differently than the woman she was 4 years ago. But I also think trust is something that has to be rebuilt slowly, through consistent actions over time." He nodded thoughtfully. At 15, he was more mature than many adults I knew, shaped by experiences that would have broken some people, but had somehow made him stronger and more empathetic. "I'm proud of how you've handled all this," I told him. "It would have been easy to be angry or to give up on your mama, but you chose to believe people can change. That takes courage." "I learned that from you, Grandma. You could have given up on her too, but you didn't." Had I given up on her? There had certainly been moments when I'd wanted to, moments when the betrayal felt too deep to ever heal from. But Marcus was right. I hadn't given up. Maybe that was the difference between love and trust. Trust had to be earned, but love was a choice you made every day, Chapter 20, Full Circle. On the 5th anniversary of that first terrifying phone call, I was working in my garden when I heard voices from the house. Marcus and Keisha were in the kitchen, making lunch together and laughing about something. The sound stopped me in my tracks. Laughter. When was the last time I'd heard genuine, uncomplicated laughter from my daughter? I stood in the doorway watching them work side by side, and for a moment, I could see the people they might have been if addiction and desperation hadn't derailed our family. Keisha was teaching Marcus how to make her grandmother's cornbread recipe, my mother's recipe that I'd taught her when she was his age. "The secret is not to overmix it," she was saying, guiding his hands as he folded the ingredients together. "Grandma Great always said cornbread should be stirred with love, but not with enthusiasm." Marcus giggled at this, and Keisha smiled, not the practiced smile of someone trying to manipulate, but the genuine, unguarded smile of a mother enjoying time with her son. "How are the tomatoes looking, Mama?" Keisha asked, noticing me in the doorway. "Good. Should have plenty for canning this year." "Remember when you used to make me help with the canning? I hated it so much." "You hated the heat from the stove, but you loved eating those tomatoes all winter." I was thinking, if it's okay with you, maybe I could help this year. I mean, if you want the help. It was a small request, but it carried enormous weight. She was asking to be part of our family traditions again, to contribute rather than just visit. "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. Later, after lunch, the three of us were sitting on the front porch when Marcus brought up the subject we all still danced around sometimes. "Mama, do you ever miss gambling?" It was a direct question that would have sent the old Keisha into defensive mode, but this version of my daughter considered it seriously. "I miss the excitement sometimes," she said honestly. "The feeling that anything could happen, that one bet could change everything. But I don't miss what it cost me. I don't miss lying to people I love or manipulating situations to get what I needed to feed the addiction." "Are you afraid you'll start again?" "Every day. That's why I go to meetings, why I work with my sponsor, why I'm careful about the situations I put myself in. Recovery isn't something you achieve and then you're done. It's something you choose every day." I found myself admiring her honesty. The old Keisha would have given Marcus false reassurances, would have promised that she was cured and would never have problems again. This Keisha understood that recovery was an ongoing process, and she was mature enough to admit her ongoing vulnerability to her son. Chapter 21, The Question I Never Expected. 2 years after Keisha's release on a quiet Sunday afternoon, she asked me something that caught me completely off guard. "Mama, do you think you'll ever forgive me completely?" We were sitting in my living room, watching Marcus practice for his driver's license test in the backyard with cones I'd borrowed from the neighborhood association. "What do you mean by completely?" "I mean, will there ever be a day when you can look at me and not remember what I tried to do to you? When you can love me the way you did before?" I set down my coffee cup and really looked at her. At 33, she had gray streaks in her hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of hard-won wisdom. She was beautiful in a different way than she'd been at 28, less polished, more authentic. "Keisha, I don't think forgiveness means forgetting. What you did changed me, changed us, changed our family. I can't pretend it didn't happen." Her face fell slightly, and I realized she'd been hoping for something I couldn't give her. "But," I continued, "I don't think that's what forgiveness really is. I think forgiveness is accepting that people are complicated, that they can do terrible things and still be worth loving. I think it's choosing to build something new rather than trying to recreate something that's gone." "So you have forgiven me?" "I've forgiven the woman who was so desperate she was willing to hurt me to save herself. I love the woman who spent 6 years trying to make amends for that. And I'm proud of the mother you've become to Marcus." She started crying then, not the desperate tears of someone trying to manipulate, but the quiet tears of someone who'd finally received something she'd been afraid to hope for. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. And I meant it. Not the blind, unquestioning love I'd had before, but something deeper and more resilient. Love that had been tested and had survived. Love that was based on who we were now, rather than who we used to be. Epilogue. What remains? Marcus is 18 now, about to start college with a full scholarship for engineering. He's grown into a remarkable young man, thoughtful, honest, resilient in ways that amaze me. The experiences that could have broken him have instead given him an unusual capacity for empathy and a mature understanding of how complicated people can be. Keisha has been clean for 7 years. She's the director of client services at the Addiction Counseling Center, where she started as an entry-level counselor. She's helped dozens of people find their way out of the kinds of desperate situations that once consumed her life. She's never moved back into my house, but she's become a true partner in raising Marcus, and we've developed the kind of adult relationship I never thought we'd have. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not going through with the kidney donation, if there's some part of me that wishes I could have saved my daughter in the way I originally intended. The question always strikes me as missing the point. I couldn't save Keisha from her addiction, her bad choices, or their consequences. What I could do was refuse to let her destroy me in the process. What I could do was protect Marcus and provide him with a stable foundation. What I could do was hold space for the possibility that people can change, while also maintaining boundaries that protected my own well-being. The kidney she would have stolen was never going to save her life. But the consequences of her actions, the arrest, the prison time, the forced confrontation with her addiction, those things did save her life, or at least gave her the chance to save herself. Marcus saved us all. Really. His courage in speaking up, his refusal to let loyalty blind him to wrong behavior, his willingness to believe in redemption without sacrificing his own safety. He showed us what real love looks like. It doesn't look like blind trust or unquestioning sacrifice. It doesn't look like enabling destructive behavior or ignoring warning signs. It looks like telling the truth, even when it hurts. It looks like maintaining hope while also maintaining boundaries. It looks like understanding that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is refusing to participate in their self-destruction. I kept both my kidneys and I kept my family. Not the same family I started with, but a stronger one, a more honest one. A family built on reality rather than illusions, on forgiveness rather than denial, on love that had been tested and had survived. And sometimes, in the evening when Marcus is studying at the kitchen table and Keisha is helping me clean up after dinner, when we're just being a family in the ordinary way that families are, I think about how close we came to losing all of this, how a 12-year-old's intuition and courage saved us from a tragedy we never would have recovered from. The human body only needs one kidney to survive, but a family needs truth, trust, and the courage to do what's right even when it's hard. Those are the organs we can't live without, and they're the ones Marcus helped us keep. In the end, the greatest gift wasn't the kidney I was willing to give, but the truth I was brave enough to receive. And the greatest love wasn't the blind sacrifice I was prepared to make, but the difficult forgiveness I chose to embrace. The end. This story is a work of fiction. While inspired by real issues surrounding gambling addiction and family dynamics, all characters and specific events are imaginary. If you or someone you know is struggling with gambling addiction, help is available through organizations like Gamblers Anonymous and the National Council on Problem Gambling.